Live, we start with breaking news out of Cincinnati. Adam Schefter, what more can you tell us?
Laura, Trey Hendrickson, the NFL's reigning sack leader, met today with the Bengals, and he was granted permission today to seek a trade with another team. That's not the type of step that the Bengals usually grant, but in this particular case, Hendrickson has been looking for a trade. This is the second straight year the Bengals have signed off on that, and in an offseason where the Bengals need to figure out a way to keep as much talent as possible, and they want to re-sign Jamar Chase, and they want to re-sign T. Higgins, and they have Trey Hendrickson in a precarious predicament. They have granted permission for Hendrickson to go seek a trade. Now we'll see if he can find one.
More from Adam Schefter throughout this show. We're also joined by Mike Tannenbaum, Mina Kimes, Bill Barnwell. Mina, when I saw this news, you just think about the player and how good Trey Hendrickson is. Did you see this one coming, though?
No, I'm surprised because Trey Hendrickson was really the only thing holding that defense together at times last year, and it was a defense that was amongst the worst in the NFL. But his production as a pass rusher was so far beyond every other player in the roster. I think we all just kind of assumed they would be trying to keep him. Mentioned he was the NFL sacks leader with 18. No one else on the team had more than 5. He had 83 pressures, which was more than the next 3 edge rushers on the roster combined. He was 3rd league-wide in ESPN's pass rush win metric. The next Bengal was 65th. I mean, I could go on. So essentially, if they trade him, they're rebuilding from scratch on that side of the ball. It does suggest to me, however, that they are going to keep T. Higgins, which was the other piece of the puzzle we were trying to figure out after they hit him with the second tag. So I guess they're doubling down on offense in Cincinnati and giving Joe Burrow what he wanted and keeping Higgins and Chase together.
You know, Mia, I agree with your analysis. I look at it slightly differently from this standpoint. I say when you're running a team, you sit between the head coach and the owner, and you look for alignment. I think it's different in Cincinnati. I think they should be very concerned about the status of Joe Burrow. When we heard Joe Burrow on ESPN and other platforms around the Super Bowl, you heard details like cap numbers and cash flow when talking about Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, and the aforementioned Trey Hendrickson. And to me, I'm not saying we're at Carson Palmer 2011 yet, or Rutledge, where basically he said he was going to retire. But the fact that Joe Burrow spoke in such detail of what he wanted to do, I would be concerned that T. Higgins is signed to a long-term deal, so second year in a row he may be on the franchise tag. And now this great player that Mina just laid out perfectly is going to be going. Like, you want to be doing the opposite. You have a franchise quarterback. You want to keep as many of these players as possible. So, again, I'm not saying that Joe Burrow's on the precipice of retiring, but if I'm the Bengals, I'm concerned about where his mindset is.
Yeah, and I would say there's about 30 or 31 other teams around the NFL who have to be thrilled at the possibility of Trey Hendrickson coming available this offseason. This is a special player. One stat I found that blew my mind called sacks created. We have it at ESPN, not just sacks you create for yourself, but for your teammates. Wow. Trey Hendrickson had 26 of those sacks last year. Nobody else in the NFL had more than 14 and a half. He nearly lapped the entire field. Think of all the great pass rushers around the NFL. That's how impactful Trey Hendrickson was. And I know he's a guy on the wrong side of 30, but remember, earlier in his career at the Saints, he was not a full-time player. He was a part-time player. He entered the league at the same time as Myles Garrett in 2017, but he's played almost 1,900 fewer snaps than Myles Garrett. So this is a guy where I know it seems like maybe he's towards the tail end of his career, but he still has plenty of legs underneath him. To me, he's one of the 3 or 4 best edge rushers in all of football.
And you're talking about the talent, and you're talking about the type of character you want in your locker room. You saw the reaction of fellow Bengals defensive players on social media shortly after Trey Hendrickson said to me this afternoon that he had been granted permission to seek a trade. They're not happy to see a player this talented, this respected, be granted the permission to go out and seek a trade. Now, here's the flip side to this, just like we talked about yesterday with DK Metcalf. DK Metcalf is a great talent. Trey Hendrickson is a great talent. You have to find somebody that's willing to compensate the team and the player. And that's not always as simple as it should be, despite the fact that we're talking about the player here who led the NFL in sacks, who's been one of the top pass rushers. You still need to find somebody who's going to be paying him, I would think, in excess of $30 million in the offseason of paying the pass rusher and compensate the Bengals to the point where they're comfortable moving on from a standout pass rusher.
Yeah, I mean, the contract's going to be enormous. Max Crosby just lifted that gap on edge rushers. Maybe that factored into the Bengals thinking, not wanting to give him the type of contract that Adam correctly says is coming his way. Love that you drew the DK Metcalf comparison, because with both of those players only having a year left, that does depress their trade value a bit. So, even though Trey Hendrickson as a player is arguably one of the best at his position in the NFL, might not be the sort of mega package I think we associate with players like that. That said, there's a number of teams, Bill alluded to this, who I suspect will be on the phone. Just to name a few, the Chicago Bears have a need at edge, and now a defensive coordinator, Dennis Allen, who you talked about him with the Saints, has history with Trey Hendrickson.
Yes.
The Cardinals are a team with a ton of cap need at edge. The Commanders, who are probably going to link with just about every good free agent on earth, do also have that need in cap space. And then I would look to the NFC South. Two teams, the Falcons and the Bucks, both have a need at edge. Everybody needs Trey Hendrickson, but those teams come to mind, in my opinion, as ones that might be on the phone.
Lou Anarumo is also in Indy, so you wonder, too, if that could be a tie potentially. And I would just say as well, in talking to Joe Burrow at the Super Bowl, Mike T brought this up. He didn't just mention T. Higgins and Jamar Chase as players that he wanted to see re-signed. He also mentioned Trey Hendrickson. So we'll keep an eye on his mental state going forward. We got more news to get to that we want to go to right now. New on NFL Live, we saw the Jaguars, but Adam, what's going on with him now?
Well, the Jaguars were planning to release Christian Kirk, but once other teams see that, and I don't know why teams don't announce this more often, the Houston Texans, a division rival, stepped in and agreed to send a 2026 seventh-round draft pick to the Jacksonville Jaguars in return for Christian Kirk, who now will not be released, who now will be traded to the Houston Texans. And the Texans have been looking for wide receiver help. Keep in mind, Stephon Diggs is a free agent this offseason. There are questions about whether or not he'll be back in Houston. Tank Dell is coming off a potentially season-ending knee injury that he suffered late last year against Kansas City. That was a devastating knee injury. And the Texans obviously feel like they need to go out and get another wide receiver to complement Nico Collins, to add some depth. And so they're sending a future seventh-round draft pick that they had gotten from the Rams to the Jaguars. Fittingly, James Gladstone takes over as the GM in Jacksonville, came from LA, and gets back the Rams draft pick in 2026.
I love when all that stuff happens. Hey, Mike T, when Kirk's been healthy, he's been really good. I love this for the Texans. They've still got to make some more moves, but what's